So let's get a couple of things out of the way first. No matter how good of a keyboard this is, it's still an iPad. No, it can't completely replace your laptop or your desktop. And yes, for an accessory, it's pretty expensive. $300 to $350 to be exact, depending on the size. So the question you might be asking is it worth buying? Or better yet, who would buy this? To help you answer those questions, let me give you a brief overview of my iPad Pro plus Magic Keyboard experience over the last few weeks. Just like all the other reviewers have said, it is hefty. Just about the same weight as my iPad Pro 12.9-inch version. Combined, they weigh very similarly, almost as much as my wife's 12-inch MacBook. Personally, I don't think the weight is an issue since we're pretty much accustomed to carrying around laptops. But if you're judging this solely on the weight alone, I would say you may be missing out on a great iPad experience. Let's talk about the general construction of this hefty little thing. The hinge is a bit tight. I'll be honest, a little bit too tight for me. I cannot, for the life of me, open it comfortably with just one hand. I mean, it's just difficult. You definitely would have to use two hands for this. With the top part being so heavy, you would think that it would be easier to separate this from the keyboard itself. But because the hinge is so tight, I just can't get myself to open this with one hand. And so it's not really a big issue. It's just that I have a newfound appreciation for my regular folio case where I can just open it with one hand and kind of just like flick it like that. And it kind of takes away a smidge out of the overall great user experience, because now you're after a few weeks, I still find myself struggling to just open this normally. And yeah, then forget about the pencil. I mean, this thing is more like an inconvenience at this point, because I'm having to be very, very careful to try to open it without dislodging the pencil and just losing it somewhere. I get it. It's not without its flaws. So the feeling that I get when I'm using my regular folio case is, if opening that regular folio case feels like stepping into a minivan with the wide doors, opening this is like trying to squeeze in a very tiny sports car, which means it's undignified. There's no easy way of doing it. You're going to look like a fool trying to open it up. Not like my laptop over there, old smarty pants. Yeah, see. You can adjust the angle of the iPad enough to be able to use it comfortably like you would a regular laptop. Although personally, I think I would prefer to have a little bit more range, but that's just me. I'm just being a little picky with it. No, you can't open it completely like you would a regular folio. That means you can't use it as a tablet with the case on. And let's remind ourselves, this is a case. The only option that you have is to actually take it off the case, which requires a significant amount of force, and use it like you would a regular tablet. Unfortunately, that leaves your iPad susceptible to damage, which will drive my paranoia through the roof. Now, placing the iPad back on its case is fairly easy. The magnets are very, very strong, so you're not second guessing yourself. You're not wondering, is this thing going to fall off? It definitely won't. For the viewers, there you go. You don't have to risk your own iPad. Thank God it didn't fall. I also appreciate how it works just right away. As soon as you connect it to the case, you don't have to pair it or anything, it just works. I think that's where the magic is, really, to be able to use it so conveniently in that regard. So the material of this keyboard is very familiar rubber matte thing that we've seen in a lot of cases and other electronic items, which is good objectively. It's a good material, but subjectively, I don't think this is really my preference, because just like those other cases or those other things that have the same material, I don't really expect this to last very long without looking very, very aged. So I expect this type of material to degrade fairly quickly, but who knows? Only time will actually tell. And so that brings me to another problem. Because I'm so worried about this case, it being $350 for this 12.9-inch version, I have no choice but to carry around a separate case. So the case that protects my iPad Pro is now in a case. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but even when I'm using this on, I don't know, like a rough surface, I would rather have something on top of the surface before I plop this thing on it. This might just be me, but having to bring another case is just another thing for me to bring. Okay, so what probably really matters to people, myself included, is how the keys actually feel. And I am happy to report that they feel great. Miles better than the butterfly keyboards. There's just enough travel and resistance on the keys that make using them feel very natural and satisfying. So you definitely know you're hitting the keys. It doesn't even feel like an accessory in that weird sense. It feels like a proper keyboard, at least to me. The trackpad itself feels good and high quality. And just like other reviewers have mentioned, you can pretty much click on any surface of it and it doesn't feel flimsy at all. You can adjust the track speed within the settings of the iPad to your preference. I like it the way it is. You can also adjust the backlighting if you prefer. And speaking of backlighting, it uses the iPad's lenses to detect the available light around you, so it adjusts the brightness accordingly. I guess I would prefer if it had the dedicated brightness and volume controls on the keyboard, just like you would find on a regular Magic Keyboard for my desktop, but I guess you can't have everything. I should say that the trackpad on this iPad Pro, I actually prefer the feeling of this compared to my 2018 MacBook Pro. So I was also surprised to find out that the lack of the escape key didn't really bother me that much. I thought it was going to, but you know, I'm so used to the gestures on the iPad Pro. I don't really use the escape button in that sense. So writing emails have become more enjoyable, oddly enough. This may come as a disappointment to you, but that's really all there is to this Magic Keyboard. I know there's so much hype behind it, but it's a keyboard and it's a great one. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's probably not going to look very nice after a few months, but for someone like me with my workflow, I'd say half of the time I'm required to have a MacBook Pro for design work, but the other half I'm just typing out emails and responding to them and just writings or whatever. And this works perfectly fine. I mean, actually, I just enjoy using it because it feels like I'm using a semi laptop without having to give up my iPad, because most of the time when I'm out, I like to carry my iPad instead of my laptop even for photos, for editing photos and just general browsing. I'd prefer this over the laptop. But sometimes when I need to type some emails or respond or whatever, you know, I would prefer to use a regular keyboard on my MacBook Pro. With this, it definitely made the experience a lot better. And now I enjoy using my iPad a lot more than I used to. This form factor is small enough, maybe a little bit heavy, but small enough to be able to carry comfortably. And it doesn't feel flimsy at all. It's a solid piece. And I think anyone would appreciate that despite the weight. So like I said in the beginning, having an awesome keyboard doesn't necessarily make it a direct replacement to your laptop. I think that if you are the type of person who enjoys using iPad OS, who's accustomed to it, who's used to it, you will definitely appreciate this. You will definitely like this accessory. So going back to my original question, who would buy this and is it really worth it? Sometimes when we get carried away with all the hype, we find ourselves justifying our purchases. So for something like this, you don't have to try to convince yourself whether you need it or not. You already know if you need it. And trust me, you certainly don't. This product right here, it's for people who've already invested a lot of their money for the iPad experience, the iPad Pro experience. Apple has done a very good job at convincing people like me to buy into the lifestyle. So what they've managed to do, in my mind, is convince me that their products need not be quantifiable in a sense that I don't have to look at a spec sheet to justify the price of an item. So it's definitely not out of practicality. I mean, when was the last time that you saw a Tesla owner and went, that man must be very practical? And so people who buy this, they want the Tesla experience. They want the brand recognition. They want the lifestyle. And so this very, very expensive keyboard, one that is not entirely perfect, one that will probably look really bad in just a few months. It's an experience. You're buying into an experience. You're buying into that lifestyle. And if you want to spend your hard-earned money, I mean a lot of it, for that, to be honest with you, I really don't see anything wrong with that.